Today on Sports Central, I'll be giving you guys my ACC Quarterback Rankings for this upcoming college football season. And this is arguably the most stacked conference when it comes to the quarterback position, and rightfully so. I mean, there are at least 4 to 5 quarterbacks in this conference that I could see being some of the best in the nation next season. So it was a tough ranking set here today. We're going to go ahead and get started. And of course, just before we get started, just so you guys know, these are the projected starters as of right now. So these aren't the official starters for each of these teams, but these are the current projections based off of spring football, as well as how each of the players are looking at this point. So number 14 is going to be Gunnar Holmberg out of Duke. Last season, he really didn't play much. 160 yards, 2 interceptions, 72% completion rate when he played. So really, he did not play much last season for Duke. He doesn't have a whole lot of experience at all. The thing is that concerns me a little bit about him is that he just does not have hardly any talent around him at Duke, and that's the problem for this Duke team right now, is just their depth is terrible. And of course, Gunnar Holmberg has got potential, but I mean, last season didn't have any touchdowns and 2 interceptions. That's not a very good look either. So he's going to be a part of our D tier. Number 13 is going to be Jeff Sims out of Georgia Tech. And really, honestly, from 13 onward, like, a lot of these quarterbacks are definitely talented, but I mean, once again, the ACC is actually a stacked conference of the quarterback position. I mean, there are so many, especially when we get to like 7 or 6, even in the top 5. Yeah, I mean, there are quarterbacks that are just easily going to be some of the best in the nation next season. But Jeff Sims, looking at him out of Georgia Tech last season, 1,800 yards, 13 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. His stats overall are not bad. The main thing is his completion rate. He's got a 55% completion rate. That's not going to get you very far when you're throwing under 60% in your completion percentage. So he's definitely got to raise that going into next season. Like, we got to see at least 59-60% out of him if we're going to see some improvement for Georgia Tech. As for 12, it's going to be Tommy DeVito out of Syracuse. And he's a very polarizing quarterback because, I mean, if you look at him back in 2019, he actually had some pretty good expectation going into 2020. Like, I thought he could be a top half quarterback in the ACC last season. I mean, coming off of 2019, 2,300 yards, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 63% completion rate. Overall, his stats were pretty good in 2019. Like, not bad at all, actually. In 2020, though, is a different story. 590 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 50% completion rate. So his completion rate dropped 13% from 2019 to 2020, and we also saw a huge decrease and a huge worsen there in the touchdown to interception ratio. So Tommy DeVito is a very talented quarterback, and I think he's still got a ton of potential, but he's got to improve and he's got to stay consistent next season if Syracuse is going to be a good team. But Tommy DeVito, I do see quite a bit of potential in him. He's got potential to be possibly 6 or 7 on this list, but based off of 2020, it just was a terrible season for him. Number 11 is going to be Braxton Burmeister out of Virginia Tech, and this was a tough one here. The C tier from 11 onward is pretty tough. I mean, all of these quarterbacks from like 11 to 8 could easily be swapped amongst each other. But Braxton Burmeister, of course, transferred in from Oregon after 2018, played in 2020, put up 680 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, so not terrible stats. 56% completion rate as well, so his completion percentage was pretty low as well. That's the main concern out of him. 2018 didn't play much for Oregon. 2017 he had somewhat of a position in Oregon. 330 yards, 2 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. That's a terrible touchdown to interception ratio, and also a 57% completion rate. So Braxton Burmeister is also a quarterback that I think has got a huge amount of potential. He just has not had the consistency at all of being a good quarterback. Number 10 is going to be Brennan Armstrong out of Virginia. Last season, I mean, his completion rate is still pretty low, and that's something you're easily going to see out of these bottom quarterbacks, is just the completion rate is so low. Like, a good completion rate for any average quarterback would be anywhere between like 61 and 65%. Brennan Armstrong is at 59, so he's a little bit higher than the previous quarterbacks here. Also put up some decent stats, 2,100 yards, 18 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, but I mean, that still needs to improve going into next season if he's going to be anywhere higher on this list going into next season. But yeah, 196 yards in 2019, didn't play much in 2019 or 18. 2020 was his first primary starting position for the Virginia Cavaliers. Number 9 is going to be Kenny Pickett out of Pittsburgh. He is a very experienced quarterback. He's got a ton of experience across the board. He's been playing since 2017 for Pitt, and that's the big reason why I think he's got a tremendous amount of potential next season. He's going to be one of the most experienced quarterbacks in the conference going into next season. 2020 put up 2,400 yards, 13 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, also a 61% completion rate. So his stats were nearly the exact same from 2019 to 2020. He just had more yardage in 2019. So he's pretty consistent. I mean, even in 2018, his touchdown interception ratio was extremely similar to his touchdown to interception ratio in 2019 and 2020. His completion rate has slightly increased over the years, but I mean, if he could get up to 63-64% next season, that would be huge for him. And also, if he could continue to put up more yardage, I think Kenny Pickett could be definitely a top half quarterback in the conference. But right now, I'm going to stay pretty safe with him at number 9. I think Pittsburgh next season could be a decent team, but Kenny Pickett's definitely going to have to play very consistently next season. Number 8 is going to be DevinLeary out of NC State, and this is a quarterback that is also pretty polarizing. I mean, he could either be much lower on this list or much higher. I mean, of course, in 2020, he put up 890 yards, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The stats aren't terrible there, 60% completion rate as well. So his completion percentage isn't terrible. In 2019, he put up 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns, 5 interceptions as well. So overall, statistically, he's not a terrible quarterback. His completion percentage in 2019 was horrendous at 48%. But, I mean, if he can continue to improve that, I think next season, NC State and DevinLeary could be a pretty good combination. Number 7 is going to be Sam Hartman. Starts off our B tier, and this is really where the quarterbacks start to really look good. And I think Sam Hartman, especially next year, could definitely be a quarterback to watch out for. 2,200 yards, 13 touchdowns, 5 interceptions last season. He's had a very interesting career with Wake Forest. Of course, you had Jamie Newman in Wake Forest, who was the quarterback in 2019 for the most part. He was a primary starting quarterback, at least in 2019, before he transferred away for last season. But Sam Hartman, of course, was the primary starting quarterback in 2018 before Jamie Newman really rose to the occasion and rose to be the starting quarterback for this team. But Sam Hartman last season was right back in the starting position. Played pretty well. I mean, his stats were better than what he had in 2018, at least, when he was the primary starter back then. So there is improvement here for Sam Hartman. He's definitely a quarterback that I think next season he's one of the most experienced in the conference. So that's going to help you a ton for one. And for two, I mean, once again, continues to improve. If he could get up to 61-62% with his completion rate, that would be huge for this team. I think Wake Forest definitely is a team to watch out for if that is the case. Number 6 is going to be Phil Jacobic from Boston College. And, of course, he's coming from Notre Dame. In 2019, he played for Notre Dame. And in 2020, it was his first season with Boston College. Played pretty well in 2020. I mean, he put up 2,500 yards, 17 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 61% completion rate as well. So, played pretty well for Boston College last season. Definitely watch out for him next season. Boston College is also a team that I like a decent amount next season. I don't think they'll be, obviously, the winners of their division by any means. I mean, especially with Clemson and all that. But, yeah, Phil Jacobic, though, I do think definitely has got potential next season. I like him quite a bit, and I like Boston College a decent amount, too, next year. Number 5 is going to be Malik Cunningham out of Louisville. Very interesting situation for him. Of course, in 2019, he put up 2,000 yards, 22 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 62% completion rate. In 2020, his stats, you could argue, declined a little bit, especially, I mean, he threw 12 interceptions last season, which is not a very good look there. 64% was his completion, which is not terrible at all. But Malik Cunningham, I do think next season definitely is the biggest quarterback on my watch list for the ACC next season. I mean, he could be a huge breakout quarterback, but at the same time, last season, I mean, his stats weren't, I mean, they were slightly better if you're looking at completion and accuracy, but I mean, overall, I mean, he just can't be throwing that many interceptions and turning over the ball as many times as he did last season if Louisville is going to be a contender next season. But I do like him, though, quite a bit. I think he's definitely a top 5 quarterback in the ACC. But Louisville in general is definitely a team to watch out for next season. Number 4 is going to be McKenzie Milton out of Florida State, and this is a huge storyline in the ACC going into next season. Is how is McKenzie Milton going to be? Of course, he hasn't played since 2018. He suffered a very severe injury, which took him out of 2019 and 2020. We haven't seen him play since 2018, which, I mean, if you look at his stats, especially in 2017, I mean, it was insane. He put up 4,000 yards, 37 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 67% completion rate as well. So he was extremely accurate, played very well for the Knights. And UCF in general was a huge contender back in 2017 and 2018. And for UCF, I mean, McKenzie Milton was a huge impact player back before he got injured. And it's great to see him back and still trying to play college ball. I mean, he's got so much potential. And I mean, he's definitely the biggest boom or bust quarterback in the ACC. Like, he could either be outstanding, he could come back from his injury 100% and just play outstanding, lights out. But at the same time, I mean, when you're out of college football and you're not playing much, for 2 years. I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not he can play like he did, especially back like how he did in 2017. I mean, in 2017, he was outstanding. Probably the best quarterback, definitely in the American Athletic, and arguably one of the best in the nation back that season. And once again, it's just so unfortunate that he took an injury like he did, but I'm definitely rooting for him. I think Florida State should be great with McKenzie Milton, and I really am hopeful for McKenzie Milton. I would love to see him be successful. Number 3 is going to be D'Eriq King out of Miami, and he has been also a quarterback that's extremely experienced. He's been playing since 2017, transferred in from Houston after 2019. Last season, he was outstanding for Miami. This team was definitely a contender last season, and this season, I mean, this team has got as good of a chance as they will, especially for the next few years, at getting possibly pretty deep into the season and possibly being a contender for the playoff. And D'Eriq King last season, 2,600 yards, 23 touchdowns, 5 INTs, also a 64% accuracy rate. So he was a pretty great quarterback last season, one of the best, definitely in the ACC, I would argue. And going into 2021, I mean, he's definitely up with the top 3 here. Like this top 3, definitely, I think all 3 of these top quarterbacks in this conference are, for one, A tier, but also should be some of the best in the nation next season. But looking back at his Houston career in 2018, that was when he really played very well. 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and also a 64% completion rate. Played very well in 2018 for Houston. 2020 was also outstanding for him. So, yeah, I'm very excited to see how he does in 2021. I think he's definitely bound for a big breakout season here in 2021. Number 2 is going to be DJ Uiagalelei out of Clemson, and this is a very interesting quarterback. I mean, of course, you got Trevor Lawrence, who's no longer in Clemson. He was an outstanding quarterback. Obviously, went number 1 in the overall, or number 1 in the NFL draft in 2021, which was outstanding and expected. I mean, it was pretty clear that Trevor Lawrence was going to be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft this past spring. But DJ Uiagalelei, it's his turn to be the starting quarterback for Clemson. And this Clemson team is losing a decent amount. I mean, there's definitely a few question marks on this Clemson team going into next season. But DJ Uiagalelei, I mean, when we saw him play last season, he was outstanding. 914 yards, 5 touchdowns, 67% completion rate. He was definitely outstanding last season when he did play in the absence of Trevor Lawrence. And he does have a little bit of experience because of that. And I think that was good for him, being able to play for a couple of games last season to get himself kind of prepared, because this is going to be a big season for him in 2021. But I think he's definitely going to be right up there with the top quarterback in the conference. But number 1, this is clear to me, Sam Howell. He's got to be number 1. I mean, just looking at him over the past couple of seasons, he has definitely got the most potential, I think, out of the ACC next season for the quarterback position. And I think he's definitely bound, possibly even for another breakout season. I mean, in 2019, his first season, 3,600 yards, 38 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and 61% was his rate, which those are outstanding stats. I mean, he's a young quarterback, first year at the starting quarterback position, and he puts up stats like that. Like, he put the entire ACC on notice in 2019 when he put up stats like that. And in 2020, he played even better. I mean, 3,500 yards, 30 touchdowns, 7 INTs, and a 68% completion rate. He raised that by 7% last season, which is pretty insane. And I think Sam Howell next season is definitely going to be the best quarterback in the ACC. I mean, even over DJ Uiagalelei, I think Sam Howell is the best quarterback in the conference next season. If he can stay healthy, North Carolina should be a national contender next season. Definitely a playoff contender. I mean, this is North Carolina's year coming up here in 2021. It's going to be extremely important for them to play very well, very consistently over the course of the season. And Sam Howell has got a ton of that on his shoulders. He's got so much talent around him. It's going to be fun to watch North Carolina next season. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this ranking set. I appreciate you guys all watching. Yeah, once again, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I appreciate you guys all sticking around. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you guys later.